Hey everyone, welcome back to the OverSeers. My name's Proelios and I'm joined as usual by my co-host Nightwing. Um, Interesting week in the Overwatch League. We had almost like one full day of upsets, which is something that we don't experience very often. All of us were just like smashing our own heads in because so many of our predictions went south. Uh, and I think like Nightwing and I pretty much had the same preds for the whole of day two. So, how do you feel about that whole day of upsets, Nightwing?
So this first week of the June tournament with these hero bans has actually been pretty insane. Uh, I think pretty much no one was expecting so many of these upsets to happen, and pretty much almost on the same day, like a lot of these. Um, so I think a lot of power rankings in people's heads are just going astray at the moment, where you don't really know where to place teams. Um, and Things are really just in a lot of flux. I think uh, it was really just very mentally booming. I think, but it's going to be interesting to see which teams really rise up from the ashes, and like the teams that can actually deal with this new meta that's forming due to the hero bans.
Mm-hmm. We saw, like, obviously with Reinhardt out, there's just no death ball being played, death ball or rush, whatever you want to call it. But because of that, we still saw a ton of variation. We saw ball comps, we saw Orisa comps, we saw Winston comps. So there was still a good bit of variety, which is always great to see. Um, but like we said, there was just one full day of upsets. Like literally, you could go through my predictions for that day, and you would just see all reds on the Pick'em website. Um, and I think one team that got especially boomed this week was the Philadelphia Fusion. It shocks me to say it because they were quite consistent during the May melee. I mean, in the qualifiers, but they just kind of fell flat on their faces, which is quite surprising. Based on what I saw, at least in the replay viewer, I just went back and watched some of their games. I think the tank line was actually doing quite well. Mano and Hotba seemed to be on the same page. It was just that Kape and Rascal were quite inconsistent. I don't think they got nearly enough picks as they got during the May Melee qualifiers, and that's where like the whole thing fell apart for them. I mean, they lost to the NYXL, who was like one of the most mediocre teams in the APAC region. So like it was just really shocking. Nightwing, what do you think? Is this like a temporary kind of fusion going on their classic losing streak mid-season, or are they actually just not gonna get a grasp of this meta?
So I think more than Carpe, even it was a lot of it was on the back of Rascal, who was just having a very silent game on Echo, where he was just not able to get really any picks. Um, I think he was being kind of pressured by pretty much the entirety of the NYXL, but still, he was just not able to really find the value on the Echo, and I think that's really what that was like a major contributor to the just absolute boomage of fusion in this particular match against NYXL. And I think they never really recovered from that, like after the first map. And NYXL, though, they were playing up to their opponent and actually way past their opponent by that point, where they had really solid fundamentals. They had very secure positioning, and they were setting up plays very well for their tanks, which I think is a very different look from NYXL from in comparison to the other matches that they've played. Of course, then they went ahead and just got themselves boomed against the Guangzhou Charge later.
Oh
But
yeah.
in that particular match against the Fusion, they were actually playing at a much higher level than their successive match. So that was really interesting to see. I think Fusion, they've got some issues to work out, and I think it's quite strange, honestly, because I think apart from maybe the fact that Hotbar Sigma is not that strong compared to maybe some other people in the league. Um, Fusion still should be in a good position to do well in this meta. So it's a little bit confusing. I think uh, a lot of it is riding on the backs of the DPS who are not really able to perform at the moment. But I'm not really sure what's going uh, into contributing to the DPS not being able to pop off. I think, um, to be perfectly honest with you, I wasn't really able to watch the match properly when I was watching it on Overwatch League because the production was just having issues.
Oh yeah,
So gonna
yeah.
be interest. It's gonna be interesting to see if Fusion bounce back. But anyway, they're not playing this week, I believe. Or
Yeah, I don't think they are.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So they've got a week off to figure out the meta, and I'm hoping the Fusion can at least salvage two wins to attempt to get into the June Joust playoffs.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah,
Mm-hmm.
uh, talking about the Fusion, they do have another cook in the kitchen though,
Mm. Yep.
with the EQO coming in. He's got his visa and he's in Korea with the rest of the team.
As
Uh,
reported by Halo, is he actually like? Is it actually confirmed that he's there?
I'm not sure, but I think Halo has been accurate enough that I'll take his word for it. I think
Yeah.
if it's not the case, then Fusion would have probably talked about it. But I'm expect at this point, I'm expecting EQ to be there with the Fusion. I think you'd still play Rascal for this tournament. I don't think it would be a wise decision to just sub in EQ randomly, even if you have got that extra week, um, just because they haven't really had time to integrate EQ in. And I don't know, it would probably be a very strange decision to kind of put him in at this point. So I don't think it should make too much of a difference. It's really on the back of the current roster to kind of make or break this tournament for the Fusion.
Mm-hmm. The interesting thing over here is that EKO being in Korea, even though even I would prefer if they played Rascal just so they have an all Korean roster, is that with EKO in the mix, in case Rascal isn't stepping up on Echo, they could just put EKO in and see what happens, because like when we saw EKO play Echo last year, he was actually quite good. And I think it might just be worth subbing him in case Rascal's not like able to pop off. Um, but we'll see because putting him in also creates an issue where they need to communicate in English unless, like, I don't know if he's that comfortable coming in Korean because I don't think Fusion have done that yet, right? Because they've always had a mixed roster. Um, but yeah, it's just interesting because now they have like around 10 days, we can say, to scrim with him and see if he's able to fit in well into the flex DPS slot in this particular meta. But I do think it's unlikely and still probably like a dicey move, right? Um, but yeah. We also had some interesting Fusion stuff that we just wanted to mention that Fusion Uni actually put together a roster to compete in Contenders Trials. And like, guess who's in the roster? Some really rookie players, right, Nightwing? Do you just want to tell us who they are?
Yes, these are pretty unknown or fresh faces. I don't think you've ever heard of them.
Yeah.
It's only Overwatch League Season 1 finalist Poco in. They've got um, they've got Poco, they've got Funny Astro, they've got Shockwave, they've got uh,
Boombox. Some guy called
Boom.
Boombox. I don't know who that is.
Surprisingly, Boombox. I'm actually quite happy to see him, and he's not actually signed to the roster, even though you might be fooled to believe otherwise. He's in there playing in Contenders Trials. Sugar Free, who was a player grinding it out at Contenders. He's quite young. He tried to kind of go under the radar by going by the name Jali.
Jali. Yeah.
Yeah, so he's in there, and they've also got Jekaru 19, I believe.
Yeah.
Yeah, so. good roster. They're just grinding it through Contenders Trials at the moment, so the players can get some experience instead of just sitting and waiting for their visas. So
Yeah.
yeah, just happy to see Fusion Uni back. I saw a really interesting tweet about Fusion Uni from Fusion Uni Facts on Twitter, where he actually said that like the number of players that have made it percentage wise from Fusion Uni to Overwatch League is like the highest, like even more than Runaway. I think with Fusion Uni, it's like 80%
Wow.
almost,
Yeah.
especially with the addition of Changsik to the Vancouver Titans now, since ShRedLock has retired,
Yeah.
which is going to be our next thing that we cover.
Mm-hmm.
ShRedLock has put out a tweet longer as well, where he stated that he just did not have that much to show for his time in the Overwatch League. And yeah, I mean, best of luck to him and his future endeavors. Changsik is coming in. He was most recently playing for the Fusion University team,
Which was
but
like
he had,
around 2 years ago, roughly 2 years ago.
yeah, 1.5, maybe 2 years ago.
Yeah.
And he's had quite a lot of time off, but clearly his trials must have gone really well, even now, for him to be picked up. So it's going to be interesting to watch how Vancouver adapts to this. A lot of their players are Western, so it's not like they'll have the easiest time just setting up that comm system again. It's going to be interesting to see how Vancouver really perform in that sense.
The good thing is Changsik actually was like on a mixed roster. Like when he was on Fusion Uni, there were some Western players, so I think they were coming in English. Because he was playing with players like Snillo, and he also had Beast, like being a co-main tank with him. But like yeah, I don't really know if they were coming in English or just picked Korean, but I think it'll be easier to integrate him because he has that mixed roster experience. And overall, I just like this pickup. Like I think it's quite interesting because while Changsik was with Fusion Uni, they got a ton of different accolades. Like won a lot of, like not a lot, like a couple of seasons I think of Contenders. Um, but yeah, I don't like the last time I think I watched him was when they were playing Goats against Runaway or something. I don't like he was there when Roll Lock was introduced. He did play in the sort of bunker meta that came about after Roll Lock was introduced, but I didn't really watch him there. But like the dude's quite versatile. He plays a good Ryan, a good Winston, a good Orisa. I haven't seen much of his ball play, but wants to assume that he can adapt at least. So I like the pickup, but I'm also a bit puzzled of like ShRedLock's timing. Like, why is he retiring right now? Because I feel like he was just starting to show what he's actually made of. I think especially his Reinhardt play was quite good in the May Melee Rush meta. So I'm wondering why he chose to step down at this moment. Because like season 3 was much like more rough for his team. So like that's why I'm a bit like there's a question mark about why he's chosen this time to retire, but I'm happy with the replacement essentially.
I
Oh,
was beginning to think Shredlock was probably a main tank that was like the least bad out of all the bad teams, quote unquote bad teams, like in the
yeah.
bottom tier, where I think you'd put Vancouver as like the least bad team almost in my eyes. But
Yeah,
they were
yeah.
really just starting to come up. I mean, Boston is now contending for that title, though they're probably punching above that at this point. So Vancouver really was in that spot for me. It's going to be interesting to see really whether they go up or down in those hypothetical stonks of mine to really see how they perform.
Hmm. So moving on to our next topic, like since you did mention Boston, GaeBullSsi has made his debut in the Overwatch League. So for those of you that don't know, GaeBullSsi is a Korean off-tank player that was signed to the Boston Uprising recently, but he wasn't actually with the team until a couple of weeks ago. So now he's like he's debuted in the Overwatch League and shown us like a few different looks, right? Um, like, what are your first thoughts on like first impressions of GaeBullSsi in the Overwatch League, Nightwing?
I thought he looked at least somewhat of an upgrade over Punk. At least I think he was doing quite well on the Zarya, especially on maps like Ilios. And I mean, the, the the least praise I can give him is that they just factually threw the Washington Justice, which I think is still impressive, even though Washington is struggling. And I mean, they have not dropped a single map, right? This week
No, they haven't. They haven't. That's
they
super
they
impressive.
they 3 Toronto and they 3 Washington. Now both these teams aren't exactly looking great, but then again, like Toronto still did beat Paris earlier in the week, like literally one day ago. So um, props to him. I think he's looking better than Pong at the moment. Uh, I think it might just be because Boston is able to kind of calm completely in Korean now, so that might be of it, and especially because the tank duo for Boston can now come and follow up with each other. So yeah, I mean, good on him. I think I'm going to be interested to see a little bit more of his Sigma probably. I'm only really convinced that his Zarya is decent so far. I think his Diva also looked good. Sigma play, I think I'll have to evaluate a little bit more, but looking good. I think it's looking quite good for the Boston Uprising. I mean, they're definitely punching above what they were during the melee, and they're currently in a position to, I mean, just get into the playoffs and potentially uh, even go to Hawaii at the moment. Like if their momentum continues, because currently they have just not really dropped a map. So
Mhm.
yeah, nice.
Yeah, I was like super impressed with GaeBullShi actually. I mean, I have been like following him since he played for WGS in Contenders Korea and like won a season of it most recently with his teammates Faith, Valentine, I'm37, who are also on Boston Uprising. Um, but after just seeing him play in the league, it was just really fun to see his kind of play style, right? Because he's neither too aggressive nor too defensive. But what strikes me about him is that his awareness is profound, right? I could always see him in the right place at the right time, finishing off kills, chasing after low health targets, harassing backlines. It was really good off tank play. Like as someone who plays a lot of off tank, I was just absolutely glued to watching him in the replay viewer. Um, I think it's a really good look for Boston, and things can only go up. I feel, considering how well they've played in Week 6. Should we then move on, Nightwing, or do you have any more points to add?
No, I think we can move on.
All right then. Uh, some really interesting news from the Shanghai Dragons as well this week. Erster has retired. So for those of you that don't know, and I don't know why you don't know, Erster is like a really versatile flex DPS player who used to play for the Atlanta Reign until season 3, but signed with the Dragons for season 4. He didn't play at all this season, but presumably because he was contemplating whether or not to retire, and now he has. So that did seem to leave a hole in the Dragons roster until they patched it with WhoRU, which is another really interesting pickup. Because, I mean, both of them had similar hero pools, right? You would, like, when you think of both Erster and WhoRU, you would think of heroes like the Genji and the Doomfist, sometimes the Pharah. Um, but I feel like this move is like it it could be somewhat of a side grade because Ursa is more so known to being like a smart player, but and Huayu is known to be a really aggressive player. So it's neither good nor bad right now because the Dragons' playstyle isn't fully set for the season. But I'm just interested to see how things proceed from here. What about you, Nightwing?
I think it's a real shame what happened to Erster. I think uh, because he did look like an MVP candidate in season 2 of the Overwatch League. And then season 3 rolls around, he doesn't really get played. When he does get played for one or two paltry matches, he doesn't look that good. And then this season, he's just MIA. He's just not there. And and then he goes ahead and retires. I think it's a very sad fizzle out for Erster, and I'm quite sad to see him go because he was a very promising prospect that did actually prove himself in the league, but then just did not get any playtime. Uh, I think the DPS for Shanghai that are being fielded are already insane. I mean, you've got Fleta and Lip doing really well, and then even uh, there's
DM.
DM on backup for Hitscan, and I mean with Fleta in the season 3 MVP, he didn't really have a lot of wiggle room to actually play. So it's sad to see him go. I think WhoRU, who is by the way another Fusion University player,
Yeah.
who is an Overwatch League professional. Uh, he was also having a kind of a rough time in the league. Honestly, the last time he was playing for the NYXL, uh, he he had to trade playing time with other flex DPS players like Libero, and it wasn't
Haksal.
really
There's Haksal too.
Libero and Haxal. Yeah, yeah, and it didn't really look that great for any of those DPS. I mean, it just seemed like a weird like cat fight between all of them as to who gets to play, and no one really came out kind of as the victor of that. I think WhoRU has kind of a chance to redeem himself now. He's been out of play for a little while, and I'm interested to see where they kind of place him in the roster. Uh, Maybe for stuff like the Doomfist and the like, but overall, I mean, you'd probably just still prefer to keep Fleta in. The man's still very flexible, and I think there's very niche situations maybe where you're trying to force one particular comp on like control or something where you may put WhoRU in, but I think Shanghai's main DPS is still going to be Fleta and Lip.
Yeah, I agree. I agree. I actually really like who are you as a DPS. I think the reason he didn't work with the NYXL was because their coaching was super flawed last season. They didn't really know what to do. Like they still had talented players, so they racked up wins, but it was just a shame that they didn't know how to utilize all of the talent that was on their bench. Anyway, I think we can move on to talking about the London Spitfire, which recently lost their head coach in Reprise. I mean, by lost, I just mean that he's retired from Overwatch, so he's not going to be coaching them any longer. He wrote a tweet longer saying that he didn't think he was doing the team justice. He wasn't like he wasn't as good of a head coach as the team needed, and because of that, he felt like he had to step down. And they've parted ways on very friendly terms, so all's good. And his assistant coach Fischer, not Fischer, Fischer, like the Danish like DPS player. He's the head coach now, and I think it's still going to be good for them because Fisher really seems to have a great understanding of the game, since he's played it at such a high level himself. So I mean, we'll see, right? We really can't comment too much on this. Do you have anything to say about it, Nightwing?
Fisher has kind of had a rough go in the T2 scene, so I'm glad to see him step into a head coach role. Um, but apart from that, I mean, it's not like London's looking great instantly. I'm interested to see what changes this can really bring to the London Spitfire. Hopefully for the better, because currently it's not like they can really look worse at the moment because it's they're like not performing well at all. So hopefully this is a positive change for them because I think they could really use it. But I'm not really sure if it is one. It's something we'll have to see.
Hmm. I think London actually played better than expected this week. I mean, they are still pretty much one of the worst teams in NA, but I was especially impressed with Hardy playing Winston. I think he understood the win conditions for his team a lot better than he did when he was playing the Reinhardt and just going in and feeding. But I think if with a few adjustments and with Fischer's new sort of point of view on the meta, they could potentially look better. But I'm not gonna hold my breath for that. Like I'm still gonna assume they'll perform just as poorly as they have done so far. But we'll see. Again, not not too much we can comment about. Should we then move on to our predictions, Nightwing?
Yeah, let's go ahead.
All right, cool, guys. Before we begin, just remember that if you guys like our analyses, like our perspectives, leave a like on the video. It helps out the channel by contributing to the YouTube algorithm, and more people can find our content that way, which is always good. All right, then let's move on to our predictions, guys. As usual, we'll be going over the NA matches first and then APAC. And as you can see, we are in stiff competition with me just being 1 point over Nightwing. He kind of just dominated me in the main melee, so I'm gonna try and win this one. Um, let's begin. Match 1 is between the London Spitfire and the Dallas Fuel. I have predicted a 3-0 for the Fuel, and so has Nightwing. Do you want to go first? Tell us why we think it's the case.
Okay, so the difference here is the Dallas Fuel is the team that won the May Melee, and London Spitfire has no wins at the moment. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's correct.
Yeah, and that's all I'm going to say. I mean,
Cool.
if you're watching this video, you know that this is going to be a 3-0.
Mm-hmm. I mean, the Fuel are better on all fronts. Like, I don't think any of the role matchups, if you look at it that way, are in Spitfire's favor. Like, you just cannot compare Hardy and Molfik to Fearless and Handan. Not like based off how Dallas has looked so far. And it's going to be interesting to even see Big Boss Spine make his debut. Like, well, we call it a debut because he's been away for more than a season. But it's going to be fun to see Pine time once again. Um,
I'm
but
not
yeah,
sure if he's actually able to play at the moment because I think he's still in Korea or is he in NA? I'm not sure.
I don't know about that. I really don't know about that.
I think it'll still be some time before we see Pine, but I mean, regardless, this should still
Oh
be a
yeah,
3-0.
yeah. I mean, Dallas won the May Melee without an actual hit scan player, so this should be a piece of cake for them. Anyway, let's move on to the next match, which is Gladiators versus Titans. Nightwing thinks it's a 3-1 for the Gladiators, and I think it's a 3-0. Um, I think that this is all going to come down to how well Changsik ends up synergizing with the Titans in his very first appearance. I think there's still going to be time to adjust to this team, and like the Gladiators have been playing together for some time now, so that's why I think they're going to take it. And like, why the difference of 3 maps? Well, it's because the Gladiators have just looked that much better than the Titans. They've had higher peaks, they are more consistent. And even though the Titans haven't looked bad, like they've taken a map or two off of, I think, all of their opponents so far, no matter the skill level. Uh, I think it takes time to adjust to a new main tank, so that's why I think it's a 3-0. Nightwing?
The good thing about for the Gladiators about this meta is that Birdring cannot play the Sombra. The bad thing about for the Gladiators about this meta is that Birdring cannot play the Tracer. That's pretty much it. Um, I think Titans do have a fighting chance. Like I said earlier, they're probably, in my eyes, the least bad team, and they can make it competitive. They have made it competitive with other teams. So I think they can maybe take a map, but it would not be surprising to see Gladiators come out with a 3-0 either. I think there's a small chance that Changsik does do well, because you have to be doing something special, I think, to come into professional play after not playing after a year, and still get signed to a team, even if you're not someone that was as flashy or as headlining as Pine. So yeah, I'm going to be interested in watching this match and see how that unfolds.
Mm-hmm. All right, moving on then to the match between the Outlaws and the Spitfire. It's a 3-0 in both of our opinions. Do we really want to break this one down? Because there is still a really big skill diff between Houston and London. Like, do we want
I
to?
do want to
Yeah.
mention that Houston did look shaky in their first match in the previous week, and they did end up taking the L there. But that said, coming into the second match against the Mayhem, Houston did, I think, figure out that they were kind of playing the wrong game, in the sense that they figured out what exact comps to play in that second match. And I think now that the meta is kind of set in stone for them, they'll do a lot better, and so it's a 3-0. I think it is fair to mention this because they did uh, take that earlier loss uh, to the Atlanta Rain. So, I mean,
Yeah.
that's why I just like to mention that. But still, I think Houston is in a position to just deliver this easy 3-0 to the London Spitfire.
Mm-hmm. All right. Yeah, I pretty much agree. So we can move on to the next prediction, which is for the match between the Shock and the Defiant. Nightwing says it's a 3-0 for the Shock. I think it's a 3-2 for the Shock. Now, why do you think it's a 3-0?
Okay, so my reasoning is, in terms of double shield, you would put the tank line of the Shock above the Defiant by a lot, in my opinion. I mean, Sado's great, but I'm not really convinced about Michelle's Sigma. And double shield is what I think most teams are succeeding on. And even if they are not, I mean, even with the dive, it still has. I'm still going to see, I think, probably Smurf put in along with Void if they want to play the. I mean, Smurf with Choi.
Yes,
Sorry,
yes,
not
along
Void.
with Void. Yes,
Yeah,
100%.
I've been trading Void and Choi in draft buff
I
lately. So
wonder whom with.
yeah. So anyway, I just think Toronto have been looking incredibly weak. To be perfectly honest with you, they got uh, handily beat by the Boston Uprising, and they had quite honestly a rough match against Paris as well. They didn't look that great. I think Hisu not being able to carry on the Sombra or the Tracer is really kind of hurting Toronto in that sense. Obviously, Striker is not able to play the Tracer as well, but I think Shock is adaptable enough to kind of get through that.
Mhm. So here are some of the reasons why I don't think Shock is going to be as dominant so far. Firstly, they've been fairly inconsistent in the past weeks. I don't think they are like the kind of invincible SF Shock anymore. People have found holes in their armor and sort of exploited them and um, been able to beat them essentially. So I don't think it's going to be like a big gap between both these teams. Also, with the bans, Striker can no longer play Tracer, Violet can no longer play Zenyatta, Super can no longer play Reinhardt. So they are down like multiple options for some of their best playmakers. Although I think Smurf being there and like being able to play essentially the remaining three main tanks to a really high level. He's been a little bit quiet so far this season. Um, and if you look at Toronto, like they haven't looked super bad. Like yes, they have looked shaky, but so have the Shocks so far. And like I think if nothing, like Hisu and Nice can make this a competitive match because there's not going to be such a massive DPS diff with like Striker's Tracer being unavailable. So we'll see. I do think it's going to be a really close and interesting match to watch. Should we move on to our next prediction?
Sure.
So the next one is Rain versus Gladiators. I think Rain's gonna win 3-0, and Nightwing thinks Rain's gonna win 3-2. Do you want me to go first, or do you want to?
Yeah, I want you to tell me why you think gladiators are that far below the rain. That's what I'm confused about.
So the thing is, this was a challenging prediction to make simply because we haven't seen the Gladiators playing in this meta yet. But looking at the hero options, right? Like you said, Bordering cannot play the Tracer over here. Like that's I think a big hit to the Gladiators because I think Bordering's Tracer was one of the best things about that roster. But that said, like it's still not a bad lineup. The reason why I think it could be a trio is because the Reigns tank line has been looking super solid. Like anytime you can put Gator on the Orisa, especially in a meta that's allowing for really good Orisa play, it's always going to be an advantage that Atlanta uses. And Gator and Hawk have just been looking exceptional on the Orisa Diva pairing, which is kind of an odd pairing considering that Sigma is still available. But they've been making it work. Like Gator's been really like buying a lot of space on Orisa. Hawk's been like checking flank angles, eating enemy cooldowns, and like chasing after low health targets, finishing them off. They're doing everything that you would want an Orisa Diva tank duo like to do. I just think they're looking really solid. And Iris on the flex support, like whether it's BAP or Ana, he's looking really good. And just the fact that they can play their sort of classic fast-paced bunker style, it's a big boon to them. And they can also play it against like many different comps. We saw them playing it in against double shield. We saw them playing it against double bubble, against dive. So you can see how adaptable this team is, and until the gladiators sort of show like prove their worth, I don't think I can show too much confidence in them because they did look shaky in the May Melee qualifiers. That's why I think it's possibly a 3-0. You can share your thoughts now.
I think attributing gladiators looking shaky to in the May Melee qualifiers is a bit strange. I think there was a stat that they were like, I think 0.34 meters of payload distance away from being there instead of Dallas in the May Melee qualifiers. So, I mean, in the playoffs for that tournament, and I think Gladiators can at least make it a bit closer than that. I think Atlanta are kind of streaky at times where. I mean, yes, they have been looking good. Yes, they beat Houston, but Houston were playing very like, unoptimal comps, in my opinion, and that's kind of what they stated themselves as well. And I think once they found the right meta, the right comp for them, Houston did a lot better. But in that first match against Atlanta, they were kind of just not. They were a bit in the dark about what to play. I think in that sense, Gladiators have had 1 week to kind of watch game tape to figure out the meta. I think they have enough ammo in that sense to at least make a compelling case for themselves. That said, Atlanta have been looking quite good, and so they should be taking this match. But I think it will be somewhat close, at least. I don't think it will be a 3-0.
Okay, then let's move on. The next match is between the Refined and the Outlaws. Nightwing says it's a 3-0 for the Outlaws, and I say it's a 3-1. Do you want to break this down first?
I think the main difference here is just that you have slightly more confidence in the Defiant than I do. I think there's not much more to go over.
Yeah, actually. Let's just skip this one, I guess.
Yeah.
Let's move on to Titans versus Rain, which I think is a 3-0 for the Rain. And Nightwing said it's a 3-1 for the Rain. I think again this is just you having more faith in the Titans than me because of the Changsik thing. So
Yeah, I think it
yeah.
could be just a bit of a like a honeymoon phase thing
Yeah.
at best. I think it could very well be a 3-0. I think Titans will have to fight kind of tooth and nail for that even one map. But I don't know. I'm feeling good about Fusion University players this week.
Yeah, let's move on to the next prediction. Uh, okay, the next one is a big one. So, Fuel versus Shock. I think it's a 3-0 for the Fuel, and you think it's a 3-2 for the Shock. This is like, I think this is as far apart as our predictions could have been. Because, like, not only do you think it's going to be close, but you think Shock's going to win, I think it's going to be a walk in the park for Dallas. So, do you want to go first?
Yeah, let me go first because I think any reasonable person would probably think this is the hotter take. Um, I think in terms of just the tank line, I think Shock is in a better position than the Fuel, to be perfectly honest with you. Just because Smurf is going to be able to play that Orisa and the Winston both comfortably. I'm not sure how Dallas are going to look on that double shield, to be honest with you. I'm not really convinced that that comp is going to work out well for them. Shock do also have long range hit scan proper with so they'll be able to play that Ash Echo. I think much more effectively, a la the Hangzhou Spark have been uh, compared to Dallas, who just do lack that hit scan right now. I think Dallas will try to figure out kind of an inventive way around that. They'll try to fit in another flex EPS probably, but I'm not really convinced that that is the way to go. I think generally a hero like Ash does work very well with that double shield, and so I think that the absence of that will kind of uh, bite Dallas in the behind a bit. So while I know they're coming out off of this huge high because of the melee, and they're looking very good, very adaptable. Uh, I am not sure how Dallas will really adapt here. I think I may just change my mind about this if I see them dominating in their earlier match and they figure out a comp that is elite, that only Dallas can play, and they're looking very very good on it. Uh, but I think just in the traditional sense of just being able to play what seems to be turning into the meta for this tournament, I think Shock is in the better position for that. I think they've had some time off to work on their mental. Uh, I think Shock should be in a decent position to at least make it close. I definitely don't think it will be a 3-0, even if Dallas do win.
Fair enough. Fair enough. So the reason I put it as a 3-0 is like I feel like at this point I don't want to put too much stock in the Shock uh, until they just once again prove their worth. Similar to what I said about the Gladiators, because yeah, the Shock is a good team, but I mean, the Dallas Fuel still have some really good options to run in this meta. I especially think they will like the sort of Reaper Echo or the Reaper Soldier dive rush that we've seen coming out of some of the other teams. You definitely want to play Fearless on Winston as much as possible, and like with a Moira Lucio comp, you can play high tempo, which is how the Fuel like to play, and I genuinely don't think like with the way they've been playing, they will not need to resort to those Orisa comps on most maps. Um, and plus, yes, Shock. I think they definitely have the advantage in terms of versatility because not only can they play the Ash Echo, they can also opt into playing the Reaper Soldier or the Reaper Echo if they want. And like they do have a ton of different options even with respect to the support line. Like they can run Honor Mercy with Twilight and FD God. They can even opt into the Moira Lucio comp with either Violet or Twilight. Um, so it's they do have a ton of different options. But just looking at both these teams' performances and kind of trajectories so far, I have a ton more faith in the Dallas Fuel to take this match. Maybe it will not be a 3-0. Like, it's again a tough one for me to gauge because we haven't seen the Shock playing in this meta yet. But like right now, I think the skill gap between them is enough for this to be a sweep. But yeah, like I'm not putting a ton of stock into the 3-0 score itself. I just think Dallas is the better team right now.
I think one thing I will concede is that uh, Nero's Echo, for example, has not been looking nearly as good as either Sparkle or Doha's. And a lot of these matches are sometimes just coming down to like Echo diff. I think a lot of the time the Echo kind of has to carry you. Even look at Nice for Toronto. He's kind of the only player that has actually been looking good in my eyes. The rest of the team has just not been looking that good. He pretty much has to just make solo plays to make like any chance for his team, and that's what a lot of these Echo players are doing at the moment. So if it comes down to that Echo diff, I will concede that I think Doha and Sparkle, both of them are looking better on the Echo than Nero at the moment. So I'll still go with the Shock Pred just because that's what I started off with. But I think Dallas is probably the more favored one here. I just want to I don't know. I want to get that extra point by making a hot take. So I don't know. I think it'll be interesting to see. I think one thing that's good about this Shock, and I might, and I know I sound like a Shock simp here, but they've kind of they've got a lot of playoff experience. I know Fearless does as well, but I mean these guys have been champions. They know how to reset their mental, in my opinion. So that should be kind of a tool in their arsenal for them. I think this is the most interesting match of the week for me. I'm gonna be watching this one with my eyes glued to the screen.
We are gonna have to be like either up all night or gonna have to wake up like really early and just watch this. I mean, I'm in, honestly. This could be a really fun match. So, yeah. Let's move on then to the APAC region. The first match is between the Dragons and the Valiant, and both of us have pretty much predicted the Dragons to sweep. So, I mean, do we even want to break this down? Because, I mean, the skill gap between the Dragons and the Valiant is like the biggest chasm in the world. So, I really don't think we need to break it down.
Yeah, just go next.
Yeah, go next. The next one is NYXL versus the Seoul Dynasty. So Nightwing thinks it's a 3-2 for the Dynasty. I think it's a 3-0 for the Dynasty. Do you want to go first on this or should I?
I think despite their loss to Guangzhou, NYXL did show some very strong fundamentals in that match against Philly. I think that's not something you can unlearn that quickly. Even if they did struggle against Guangzhou, I think Seoul is also just there is that Chengdu zone, but Seoul has its own mysterious zone where it just does not really make sense a lot of the time. I'm not really ever confident about what Seoul is going to do, to be perfectly honest with you. I think just is not really that comfortable on the Orisa compared to the Monkey, obviously, which is his best hero. Prophet is not going to be able to play the Tracer. Obviously, he will play the Echo, and Fitz will probably play the Ash. But I don't know. I think NYXL can make this competitive. I think the most likely outcome should actually be probably a 3-1. But I think I'm just not. I'm putting Seoul just a little bit lower just because we haven't seen how they're going to look in this meta yet. And they didn't look particularly impressive in the melee either. So that's why.
I think that gesture is actually really good on Orisa. You said he's not that comfortable, but Orisa is actually one of the main tanks he's known for the most. So I do think he will be fairly
I meant in
comfortable.
relation to the Winston. I mean, his Winston
yeah.
is his best hero.
Then yes.
I mean, yeah.
Yeah.
Uh, Also, I'm not really that confident in to use Sigma, or if they want, they'll put Marvel on Sigma again. That's again just a very strange, just like spaghetti pocket situation. Uh, I think Soul is often just quite a big mess that has to sort itself out, and I'm not really confident that they'll be able to do it. I think they are still favored in this match, but I think it'll be close just because I'm not sure what Soul's gonna do.
Yeah, I feel like Soul's DPS line has been much more consistent than the NYXLs. I think you would agree with me on that statement, but um, it's it's a matter of more than that, right? Like rather than like just saying they have a more consistent DPS line, we even look at the hero pools. You've got Reinhardt out of the mix, which means I think Gesture is going to be in full time, um, just playing either the Winston or the Orisa. If he has to play ball, like things might get a bit shaky. But for the most part, these two are the core main tanks that are being played. And no matter if they play double shield or if they play full dive or if they play double bubble, I think this team is going to look fairly good just because of how they have in the past. If they get to play double bubble again, creative Zana is pretty solid. So I think they could go for many different looks, which they have proven themselves to be good on. You're right about 2U not being like one of the best, like, or the better off tanks in this situation, but I think the rest of the team is going to make up for that based on the compositions that they play. If you get the Ashen there, I think Fitz is going to do an amazing job. His raw aim is quite good, so I do believe that he is going to be able to get the better of either Flora or Guangbong based on whomever is playing. I mean, although Guangbong is pretty cracked, I'll give him that. But I do have more faith in the dynasty given how inconsistent the XLC have looked even like just in the past week. Should we move on then to the next match?
Yeah, go ahead.
Uh, yeah, so the next one is NYXL versus Valiant. I think it's a 3-0 for the Excelsior. Nightwing thinks it's a 3-1. Um, what are your thoughts here? Do you want to go over why you think Valiant gets a map?
Uh, I just I don't know. I think the Valiant has to get a map somewhere, right? That's basically just my line of thinking, where they have to do something, right? To show some signs of life somewhere. I think NYXL is a team that is in a position in their striking zone at least to grab a map. So I mean they did even grab a map off of was it Chengdu or Philly during the May Melee qualifiers? I don't know which team they grabbed the map off of, and I mean both of these teams were looking quite good.
It was
So
Chengdu, I think.
even if it was Chengdu, I mean Chengdu didn't look bad during the
Yeah,
May
yeah.
Melee
No,
qualifier.
no, they looked quite
So
good.
if they can grab a map off of Chengdu in that situation, they can probably get a map off of NYXL. I mean, I don't think that's too much of a hot take. I think while
So,
it's very unlikely that they lose, that NYXL loses the match, but I think Valence is not so terrible that losing, like winning one map is out of the question.
mm,
That's literally just my. It's just statistics, probability, rolling the dice, where like you have to win a map somewhere, right? That's all I'm thinking.
no, you could be right for sure. Like, I'm not 100% confident that the NYXL will sweep either. I just think it's a more likely outcome than a 3-1, maybe by like 5 or 10%. But uh, yeah, I think we can just move on. I think this is the final match of the week in the APAC region, which is Dynasty versus Dragons. So Nightwing says it's 3-1 to the Dragons, and I think it's a 3-2. Honestly, it could like might as well be a 3-1. I mean, I don't think the scoreline really matters. Like both of us think it's going to be at least a mildly competitive match, and that the Dragons are going to come out on top. Um, do we want to go into the reasons for that, or
Yeah, I mean
should we?
it's pretty clear. I'm just a bit more concerned about what Seoul is going to do, and that's why I've put them a map lower. It's not rocket science. Mm, I think
Yeah,
we both agree that Shanghai is going to win the match. I think
yeah.
it's just about how competitive Seoul makes it.
hmm
That's pretty much it.
It's going to be interesting because I think Shanghai has had higher highs in the league so far, but they have also looked more inconsistent than Seoul. Seoul has had like lower highs, but they haven't like royally messed up at any point. So it's going to be interesting, like, because Shanghai did get swept by the Hangzhou Spark last week. Although, like, yes, Hangzhou is actually looking quite good at the moment. Like, subbing Shy in instead of Godsby is really making a massive difference. But uh, it's still going to be Shanghai coming out on top in both our opinions. So, anything more to add over here for the Preds, or should we move on to rounding things off?
I think we can round things off, honestly. Oh, one thing I do want to mention, I am so glad that Guangdong got to play another map this week. And he looked quite good on it. He was playing Junkertown versus Guangzhou Charge, and that's the only
Oh
map
yeah,
they actually won versus the Guangzhou Charge. And when we were playing Feather and Flora on the other maps, they lost all of them. So
can I get two Fs in the chat?
I'm
Possibly.
just
That
I'm
was
just
just sad.
yeah. I mean, uh, just really happy that Guangdong got another chance because he only really got one map to play before this, and that was almost a month ago. So I'm happy that they're still at least considering him as a DPS player instead of just putting in Flora all the time.
hmm
Um, Hopefully, this means he'll maybe see a little more playtime. Uh, I think he's is still an incredibly talented player on the hit scan role. Maybe he doesn't work that well with the team dynamic. I don't know, but I think he can still do well in the league if he's just given some chances. So I'm glad to see that. Uh, and yeah, that's pretty much it.
Okay, then I think we've covered pretty much everything we needed to. So yeah, thanks a lot, guys, for listening so far. We really appreciate all of the views, all of the watch time. It's really nice to see those stats go up in the analysis section of YouTube Studio. Um, but yeah, we really appreciate all the support, and if you could go that extra mile, just like, comment, share, subscribe, uh, keep like help our content reach more followers of the Overwatch League. That would be really amazing. We could grow our community and just make it a healthy environment for everyone overall. So thanks a lot for listening, guys, and we will see you next week for the week 8 predictions. So bye, see you.